Hello, everybody. I'm Phil Brandt, President and CEO of AIM Employers Association, and welcome to This Week at Work.
This Week at Work is the only show about the workplace that offers you front row seats and a microphone, featuring experts in human resources and employment law to bring you practical, timely, and accurate insights so you can more effectively lead your organization. It's Thursday, March 21st, episode 271. Today, amidst record low unemployment rates of 3.7%, the quest for talent has reached unprecedented levels of intensity. Whether grappling with the departure of seasoned staff due to retirement or with the challenge of luring top-tier candidates, employers across the board are feeling the heat. So what can you do? Enter Jessica Gibbens, a seasoned talent acquisition expert armed with innovative business models and cutting-edge talent acquisition strategies. Join us as she shares real-world success stories. Plus, we bring you the latest in employment law and answer your questions. All this and more on This Week at Work.
All right, welcome back, everyone. It is springtime. We have March Madness. Bert Garland is back in the house with us. Good morning, Bert. How are you today?
Good morning, Phil. I am ready for March Madness. It is my favorite thing in sports because it is so entirely unpredictable.
It's just madness, Bert. It's just madness. Well, I did a little chat GPT this morning to pick a winner. So I'm curious. I'll share my winner with you. Do you have a bracket? Anything interesting that you've selected in your bracket?
Of course I do. I have a couple brackets going on. My brackets, I've chosen to name them this year. Usually it's Zona or Bust because I am an University of Arizona alum. And I always pick with my heart, and I never learn because, unfortunately, they tend to bow out pretty early in the tournament a lot of times. So this year I have renamed my my brackets in my various pools to Burton Never Learns. And of course,
never learn. Okay.
Yes, and I have picked Arizona to win it all. Which means that, Phil, I understand that my pick is probably going up against your pick in a game other than the finals.
Well, I love my chat GPT and I use it all the time. I try to encourage everyone to use AI the best they can and embrace it, whether we really like it or not. It's probably something we need to embrace and be aligned with. But according to my chat GPT here, it looks like best odds sit with UConn right now, and it's my understanding that UConn and your Arizona team are in the same bracket. Yes,
they're in the same side. So if your UConn makes it, that means my Wildcats don't. But the plus side is that the UConn mascot is a Husky. Everyone on the program knows I own 2 Huskies. Very fond of my dogs, and if that's the case, I'll still be happy to see the Huskies represented in the finals.
All right. I can appreciate that. Jessica Gibbens back with us. If you haven't met Jessica before, Jessica is one of our key AIM recruiters and does such a good job for all of our members. She was just on stage last week and did a fabulous job at the Wayfinder Summit down at the factory. Jessica, we got a lot of great feedback from your presentation. Good morning. Do you have a pick for March Madness? I want to invite you into the conversation here.
Good morning. I appreciate the invite, but I'm respectfully declining. I didn't use my chat GPT this morning.
All right. Very good. Well, we got a lot of good things lined up for us today beyond March Madness. It is springtime. We're having fun. And next week, we have our first annual Illinois Compensation Strategies for Compliance event. That's on March 26th in Peoria. It's an in-person only event. You will get 2.5 hours for that session. Mikey Mack, as you know him from our program here, that is Michael Makakovich, who is going to be in town for that event and going to share a lot of compliance strategies and talk a little bit about some of the things we need to do, particularly in the state of Illinois as it relates to complying with the new legislation and rules in Illinois. So we're excited to be doing that. And if you haven't already heard, the phone keeps ringing, but just so you're aware, our 10th annual AIM Leadership Conference is sold out. That's sold out really at the end of February. So we're really excited by that. We have more corporate tables, Bert, than we've ever had before. which really kind of excites me because then we get a team of 10, from an organization that get a chance to be impacted by the speakers and the topic and everything learned during the day. And that, when you take it back to the workplace, that can help, shift your work environment culturally the way you would hope to do so. So that does excite us. Bert, I know your team has a table selected for that. Thank you for your contributions as always. The poll question is, what aspect of hiring processes are you focused on in 2024? We give you some selections there to pick from. Which of the following, the second question is, which of the following is a bigger challenge for you? Candidate engagement / fallout, or new hire retention / turnover, and that being for the first year. And then finally, I love it, the word cloud. When I find out a candidate is ghosting, I think, and keep it clean. When I find a candidate is ghosting, I think, and I could probably plug that in with a lot of PG-13, and I got in trouble for saying the S word on here, so I'm not going to say that again. Bert, now we can pull that lever. Go ahead, Nick.
All right, it's time to look into what's trending in employment law. Lawyer, you're on the clock.
I wanted to mention that Congress has unveiled a $1.2 trillion plan to fund its agencies through September 30th. These congressional leaders have released some details of this $1.2 trillion deal to keep open most U.S. government agencies through September 30th. This comes just days before a Saturday deadline for a partial government shutdown. This package is being backed by President Biden and leaders of both parties. It imposes a 6% funding cut on the State Department and foreign operations. Interestingly, there are some interesting provisions in here. It bans U.S. embassies from flying the LGBTQ pride flags or other non-U.S. official flags. Republicans had pushed for a cut of 22% to domestic spending, but they were not successful in getting that full cut. Some other interesting provisions is it doubles security funding for Taiwan, prohibits any effort to ban gas stoves in the U.S., claws back $20 billion in funding for tax collection.
Stop for a minute. Wait a minute. What did you say? Say that it prohibits any effort. Say that again.
It prohibits any effort to ban gas stoves in the U.S. You're acting like this is news to you.
like a gas stove, like for your home.
Yes, you're missing out on this, Phil. That our government has been spending a lot of time recently trying to ban gas stoves in the U.S. for environmental purposes.
All right, there we go. That's going to solve the problem. Right. Now we are aligned. We got it going. I mean, we are a first world, first class country. There we go.
So this new bill, this new bill prohibits any additional efforts to ban gas stoves in the U.S. It claws back $20 billion in funding for tax collection from Biden's signature inflation law, and continues a long-standing freeze on lawmaker pay. Interestingly, it also provides $200 million for a new FBI headquarters in suburban Maryland. So just a few things that are in this new funding bill, but everybody should rest assured that our federal government will get to continue operating with this new $1.2 trillion plan when it gets passed.
All right. Well, we got money. Let's go.
Yes, got money to spend. Not sure what it'll do to inflation, but that remains to be seen, and that'll lead into Jessica's talk probably about talent these days. So the next is breastfeeding workers have really been targeting fast food and retailers under the new law. We've discussed the Pump Act recently in light of a Texas decision that said that the law is not in effect in Texas for Texas employers, but that court decision was limited just to Texas. Recently, about 12 employers have been hit with federal lawsuits under the Pump Act, which was enacted in December 2022. that gave workers the right to sue their employers for monetary damages if they don't give them enough time or private conditions to express breast milk. So there have been some safeguards in place since Obamacare passed for about a decade ago, but there were some loopholes in there in that law. In this Pump Act really did close those loopholes. And one of the most important pieces of this is that this act, there really are employees who struggle with where to go and are often told just go pump in your car or go pump in the employee break room, and they're forced to live without the complete privacy while pumping. And the previous Labor Department enforcement efforts on this, they were really hampered by the weak legal remedies of the lactation provision of Obamacare. But under the Pump Act, workers can now sue their employers for lost wages, liquidated damages, and punitive damages, among some of the other remedies. Now,
So Bert, if we're thinking about this for a minute and you're listening to the program, what are a few things that employers can quickly just observe about their workplace or ensure that they have alignment on to avoid any of these lawsuits?
Yeah, I think the biggest things, and that gets to the point of these cases that have been filed in the restaurant and retail industry, is that those buildings really are not physically equipped to provide a private space for pumping. And so the first and foremost, employers need to think about where they can provide a private space for females to express their breast milk in the workplace.
So we're thinking that. So I'll just take some workplaces and conversations I've had. And someone said, well, we don't have any pregnant workers today, or we don't have any nursing mothers today. If we do, we will identify a place. Is it something I need to do now before we are confronted with that and let people know? Or is it something that is okay to do when the situation presents itself?
Well, I would always suggest, Phil, that we think about it in advance so that we're not panicking at the time the request is made. And you want to make sure that wherever the location is, that it is private, preferably with a room that locks. It needs to have a seat, a small table, and an outlet to plug in the breastfeeding pump. People also could use a manager's locked office. So you need to be thinking about this ahead of time. And if you are in the restaurant and retail industry, one of the things that we're seeing pop up is that there are these lactation pods that could be rented or purchased to put into a location where somebody can go in and express breast milk. And again, if you get to the restaurant and retail industry, if you think about the layout of your average fast food restaurant, really the only private space in that restaurant that's not a bathroom, which isn't even fully private, that's only semi-private, is the manager's office. And so there's these lactation pods, we might start seeing those popping up in more and more
pun
locations.
Intended there. Yeah.
There you go.
There's
Freudian
one for
slip.
the blooper reel, Nick. There's one for the blooper reel. All
Yes.
right, that's great. What else you got on docket there, Bert?
All right.
Anything?
The last one I want to talk about is, we've talked about this on the program before. Chibs has talked about this before on the program. I've talked about it, but OSHA is nearing the enactment of a rule that specifies that workers can choose whoever they want to represent them during safety and health inspections. So again, we've been talking about this for a while. This largely reinstates a 2013 Obama era policy that was reversed under the Trump administration. And basically what it says is that if an OSHA inspection is taking place, safety or health inspection, that the employee gets a representative to go accompany the OSHA inspector during the investigation. And now this, again, I want to stress, this is a very, very union-backed effort to get union officials on site during a safety inspection. And it doesn't
I
matter
can
if
see
you're
this being a big deal, definitely during a union campaign. Often you'll have formal complaints and OSHA show up during that time. And, you'd normally be able to keep your union rep out who's trying to organize your facility. And here it'd be a clear invitation to come in. Yes.
Yes, and now the big deal is that the OSHA inspector can turn down the representative's participation,
Okay.
but basically, this rule is expected to allow workers at non-union work sites to select an inspection representative who is not a coworker. So that gets to your point, Phil, that they may choose to select a union organizer or someone else of their choosing to accompany the OSHA inspector. But again, that OSHA inspector can turn down that representative's participation, but my hunch is we won't be seeing much of that.
Well, the key thing is the OSHA inspector can turn it down, but it does not sound like the employer can. And that's, again, I think what Chibs would say, when OSHA shows up, that's when you want to call our friends over at Ogletree and get some guidance right from the beginning. So you don't get yourself in a little unanticipated trouble there by turning someone down that shouldn't be under these new guidelines for sure.
That's exactly right. There's a lot more in the news, but I think in the interest of time, Phil, we'll cover those three today.
All right, that sounds good. So we'll stick with that. We got some March Madness going on, but I want to get into Filbert's Forum. Nick, I know you got some funny things going on with the memes today. And Jessica, I think this warms you and I up just a little bit for a great discussion because these are the things that we're dealing with when we're talking about recruiting. And this is a little, I don't know if is that like a little Yoda? What is that there, Nick?
We're not showing it yet. We hadn't kicked it off. We hadn't kicked off Filbert's Forum, but there we go. Now we got it.
All right.
There it is.
There we is. All right. So a little Yoda guy, a recruiter when their candidate ghosts them. I think I've felt that expression before myself when we've been ghosted here at the AIM office or we're helping someone and that happens. But ghosting definitely is a problem. And Jessica, we should talk a little bit about that. Sure. And then one of my favorite movies were The Millers, which is quite funny movie. If you haven't seen that, this is a funny one as well. My candidate resigned after a month of joining. That's not always the best case scenario, but it does happen. And I like this one. Mine ghosted me a couple of days ago. And then the final two here, my candidate didn't come for the interview. That's frustrating, Jessica, when that happens. Everyone's lined up, you got your team ready, and then all of a sudden they didn't show up. But something I think we can relate to is this guy saying, you guys are getting candidates. Jessica, I like the last one. You guys are getting candidates. And I know from my own experience and working with you and you helping us with some of our staff here and with plenty of our members, that final one, you guys are getting candidates. What is it today about the candidate pool that has us all talking? I mean, it's a tough environment out there. And I just want to open it up with a question like, have you ever experienced the environment that we're in the last few years in any of your time as a professional recruiter?
No, I mean, I would say definitely the year before COVID, so 2019, I think is when we really started to feel the competition as an employer and the ghosting kind of amped up then. And then we had that, year or two during COVID where things were just different in general. And then right back at it. So since 2022, it's been a very, very difficult market to compete in. The economy is strong. Unemployment, it remains at a 50-year low. And the candidates and the talent you want is either actively interviewing with several opportunities in front of them, or they're passive. And so you've got to have something so much better than what they're currently, what their current role is. So
it comes down, I mean, it is a competition. And I know absolutely. One thing that you do a great job with, it's a priority for us with anyone that's working with AIM, with our members, is that we want to deliver what our members need. And for a recruiter, That for you is going to start with understanding the organization and the role that you're recruiting. So who you're recruiting for and who you're trying to recruit. Tell us, how do you go about discovering that, and how do you work with the employer to understand their needs? How does that start for you?
Sure. So typically with a new employer, we'll have two calls. We'll have a discovery call, which is a more general conversation and maybe speaks to one of their needs or more, and just kind of outlines what we can do and how we can support their recruiting and hiring efforts. And then after they've made a decision and they're pretty sure they'd like to partner with us, we'll have an intake call where I just hit them with a barrage of questions. And I really insist, if at all possible, to have both HR and the hiring manager on, because they need to be aligned. And I think so often in our own organizations, HR and the hiring managers don't always have their own intake calls. HR receives the job description. The job description could be ages old. And may not even be relevant anymore, and then doesn't have all the information to really make them successful.
Yeah, and I know that alignment isn't always easy. One of the things I hear about in our roundtables and just from working with people is that sometimes HR is actually a much better salesperson than the candidate should have, right? So HR does a great job. They interview, they bring on someone, they got them all aligned, ready to start. They show up, they do a good job of onboarding, and then they turn them over to the real world after they're done being onboarded. And it's a little bit of culture shock. So having that hiring manager with them, I'm sure provides some balance to help avoid that, because that's the last thing we want, so that they're not gone, a month later. So having that transparency, I know, is what you're really trying to get to, because you're representing not just the company, but you're also representing, you want that candidate to have a good experience so that it leads to more success for that employer later with the people that candidate might know.
Sure.
When you're handling the communications with a candidate throughout the hiring process, can you just kind of talk us through how that goes? Because what I see happen quite frequently is we'll do a phone screen, we'll maybe do an in-person interview, and then something will happen and we'll need to sit for a week or two for that candidate to go to the next stage of the interview. And at that point, we lose connection with the candidate. Now we're like, what happened? We got ghosted. What's your process in staying in communication with candidates?
Sure. So I think there are a couple of key points. One is, you've mentioned transparency. And part of transparency is setting expectations with the candidates. If you know it's going to take 2 weeks, let them know it's going to take 2 weeks. It's going to be crickets. And they'll expect that. And they always invite them to check back in with you. I think so often HR and recruiters, people in the hiring process, hiring managers, think that it's still employer side or employer driven, where really it's candidate driven. So one, I think constant communication, and I use a lot of texting. It's fast, it's easy. I have it on my desktop, so I can actually do it from my computer. And I think, they appreciate that because they're working as well. So they don't always have the time to take a phone call. So I think just having those points of communication, whether it's just saying, I'm excited for your interview tomorrow, it can be a one-liner. It can also be it can be set up to where it's automatic. You don't have to do anything as the recruiter. You set it up to send. I mean, once you build out your applicant tracking system and your templates, you can still make them personal and still make them happen automatically without you having to go in and do something every single time.
I know some of the things I've done is I just stay in touch with candidates, and I might say, hey, I just want to let you know I got the management team all aligned for your interview next week. Well, I'm really looking forward to it. And then I might check back in a day or two later and say, hey, we were just talking about some of the great opportunities that this job is going to have in front of it. We're looking forward to you being a good candidate for that. This is what we were talking about or thinking about. Like, I'm giving them information that you are on our mind. And I'm really hopefully getting that impersonal contract for them to show up and for them to start getting engaged and thinking about maybe our workplace and the excitement that we have for them as a potential candidate. And that does seem to create interaction. And that's really what I'm trying to get, because for me, that starts some of the interview process. How they respond. Do they respond? What's their question to the statement that I made? And I'm using all of that also as part of my evaluation of the candidate. Is that something that you would recommend doing or not recommend doing for our
Absolutely,
recruiters?
yeah. Sure. So part of my intake call is always to gather as much information also about the work culture, the sizzle, we call it, what's great about your company, why people would want to work there. And we really lead with that so often because these candidates are passive or there's so much competition. So I think starting with, and getting excited about the candidate and telling them why objectively you are excited about them. Really giving them a clear picture of who you are as an organization, good, bad, or other at the moment, so that setting expectations. And I think also inviting them to share information with you is key. And by that, I mean, what other opportunities are you exploring? Where are you in the process? So when I check in with candidates and offer updates, I always ask for them as well. And that way, maybe it means that they're not going to show up at the final interview or they withdraw from the process at some point, but at least they're telling you, and at least going in kind of where they are in the job search.
So one of the things that normally happens is our members will turn to you after they've already tried to do the recruiting themselves, right? So they have a tough, hard to fill job, maybe for a technician of some type, and they come to you and say, hey, look, we've already posted this job on Indeed. We're not having any success. And they go to a recruiter because they're looking for someone to help them not finding the active candidate, but that passive candidate.
Right.
What are some of the tools or tricks and tips, that you might use to find those passive candidates?
Sure. So one, we are definitely armed with premium subscriptions to LinkedIn. So we have access to every profile. We can in-mail those candidates, and we can easily use I don't know how many, 40 or so search filters and different parameters where we can plug in keywords, search terms, job titles. Are they open to hybrid, remote, everything you could possibly think of? We have a way to really target that talent. And that's why it's so important also for us to gather so much information during the intake call so that we can go out. And one, we have a great understanding of the role and of the company. Two, we can craft a kind of more marketing message to them to introduce the opportunity and highlight the organization and the opportunity and kind of grab their attention. So there is some sales and marketing to it when we proactively reach out, right? So yeah. I think, if you recruit and post and pray, you're right. We typically don't post, or we will manage the employer's post while we're also doing those proactive efforts. But I can count on probably one hand how many times last year a candidate came from a post versus us going out and proactively finding, targeting.
Yeah, and that's just what people don't have time to do when they're trying to juggle everything else and manage.
Right.
All the other problems that come up at work every day and the things that Bert talks about with compliance and everything else. It's just not reasonable to think that a professional has time to spend 8 hours recruiting for one position, to bring that home. Right. And I think that's why people turn to you, and you've had great success. Let's turn our attention real quick to some of our poll results. Nick, anything interesting you want to have us look at? We'll get Jessica's opinion on.
Yeah, we have here on our what aspect of your hiring process are you focusing on most in 2024? It's a very tight race, but winning out is streamlining, standardizing, and strengthening your recruiting and interview processes and practices. But I mean, right on its tail is updating the job descriptions, requirements, qualifications, and job talent mapping. And we had a good comment on LinkedIn that also agrees. They say, great point. Both teams need collaboration and updated job descriptions.
Yeah, there you go. Jessica, I'm
Right.
surprised. I mean, investing in new recruiting and candidate tracking resources, tools, and technology. So unless everyone already has what they need, that one surprises me. That I mean, just investing in LinkedIn Recruiter is going to be it's a big investment. Not everyone wants to make that investment, but those are the things today that if you do recruiting at any level for any length of time, you're going to need those tools versus just post and pray. What
And
else you have here? Go ahead, Jessica.
On that, and I think it's important when we are looking outside of our organization to partner with a staffing or recruiting firm. As employers, we should ask those individuals or those firms what they are using. What are your tools? And because if they're just going to do the exact same thing that you're doing, it's not going to be helpful. So they really need to be armed with those subscriptions and really have a plan in place and an approach in place on how they successfully find that talent for you.
All right, so let's look at the word cloud, because that's a lot of fun before we go here. So again, the question was, when I find a candidate is ghosting, I think, and somebody's going frustrated as heck, I think is what that means.
Exactly. That's exactly what that says, Phil.
Frustrated as heck, jerk, why, loser, unprofessional. Really, I don't know if that's like really, like why, really? I guess we have why, but I always think it's probably in today's world something we have done as well as employers. It's not, and I feel all those emotions, but I also try to encourage people that, a candidate experience, unless you're doing everything to create the candidate experience, and it is called recruiting, right? There's a courtship in this process that is expected by candidates today, different from 30 years ago when I was in that space and looking for jobs. There was no courtship necessarily like there is today. Any comments on those comments?
Something we don't always think about too is that we could be getting ghosted because we're going after the wrong people as well too, who don't have the interest or the qualifications that we're looking for, even though we didn't pick up on that.
Look at you, Nick.
Yeah,
I can tell. Jessica, can you tell that Nick's wife is a recruiter?
Yeah, he's probably got a little headpiece and a little earpiece, and she's feeding him information, but he's right. And I think that's where communication is key. The more you are in communication or talking to the candidate or texting, you can tell the signs of them kind of backing away or not as interested. And like I said, it may not mean that they don't come to the interview, but you'll either kind of be expecting it because you sensed it, or they'll be more inclined to tell you if they talk to you more, especially if you're having an open dialogue about other opportunities.
Yeah, there you go. All right, Jessica, thank you so much for all the great work you do with our members. Bert, as always, appreciate it. And you know what? I'd be happy for UConn to lose to Arizona and see you have some success in that. I'll pick them as my number 2 choice. That way I'm for sure to win. But we will be back here 7:30 next week Central Time, and I will see many of you at the compensation event in Illinois. Until then, go out and be good to somebody.
Thank you once again for tuning in to This Week at Work. If you enjoy the show, please share it with your colleagues, forward our invites, share the link, aimea.org/thisweekatwork, or follow or subscribe wherever you get your news and entertainment. LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, we're everywhere you are. Don't forget you can be part of the show. Send your questions and comments anytime to info@thisweek.work. We'll see you next week, 7:30 a.m. Central Time, when we discuss what's happening this week at work.